Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a wonderful day or are having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I had such an amazing time sitting down with Justin Veri, who is the Director of Client Services at Cardiologs. He is a fantastic individual, a wonderful leader, and we talked about how he's building a new team from scratch at Cardiologs, the importance of having a strong network, and how he is building his network and strengthening it over time. We talked about his relationships with customers and how some of his ways of connecting have changed. We talked about what motivates him to be a better leader, how he got into customer success, and what keeps him there. So it was just a wonderful, well-rounded conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I learned so much. A little bit about Cardiologs. They are a med tech company. They're democratizing expert cardiac care. And they're based in Paris and they're based in Boston. Justin himself is in Somerville, just north of Boston. And he was previously, before Cardiologs, at Athena Health, where he met some amazing people that have helped him really understand the type of leader that he wants to be. And it's a fantastic network of people and peers that he's created. You'll notice behind him, he has some pictures of animals. You'll notice some baseball, I think you can maybe see in the background. He's huge into sports, some comic books, some action figures. A friend of him was actually a wrestler, and they built an action figure of him. So it's pretty fun to take a look at the backgrounds and see some of the things that make Justin Justin. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I know I absolutely did. And again, I learned so much. So without further ado, here's Justin. How has working remote affected you and your relationships with customers? Are you normally on site, chatting with them, visiting them? Or is this, not too different from how the experience is normally with Cardiologs?
I've been traveling I usually see like a customer at least once a month, up until this point. I think everybody at this point though is just okay with, they understand the situation. And so, that helps. It helps that we have good relationships with our customers, very strong relationships. And being on site is really nowadays a nice to have, and something that we will remain a nice to have once we're able to do that again. But luckily, I don't think we suffered from it. We do have some new customers going live soon, and that I think that could be where we see some kind of diluted quality a little bit, because being on site when that relationship first launches, I think is important. That's a little bit different, but we shall see, because we will have no option.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, to your point, for the customers that you were able to have some quality face-to-face time with, how their adoption rates, engagement rates maybe differ from those that you haven't had some of that, quality time one-on-one with. I am curious to know, though, obviously relationships are a huge motivator for me. Most people in customer success are motivated by the relationships that they have with their customers. I always joked that I was hugely interested in psychology growing up, and I was surprised I didn't become a therapist. But I think that is probably not a really good thing for me, because I would take home every single problem and not be able to set it aside. The joy with customer success is that you're supposed to take home every single problem and then figure out how to fix it.
It's your job. Yes.
Yeah, it's your job. So, so there you go. I think it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, and I've enjoyed it. So, on the relationship topic, how is building relationships changed for you for customers that are just getting started and launching this month? Have you had more Zoom calls with them? Are you doing more video conferencing calls? Or have you found that actually it's much easier to build deeper connections and you don't have to have so many touch points? And what has shifted, if anything?
I would say that we've been a little bit more responsive and attentive, more kind of time sensitive to that stuff, right? So if something that maybe could have been resolved over email easily without anyone having problems before, now I'm a little bit more quicker to pull the trigger on jumping on the call, right? Just so that we're, hearing each other's voices more often, getting to know each other, right? At the beginning of every call, you're kind of checking in on everybody and getting to know them. So that's kind of the small shift that I think we've made to keep that connection, is just being a little bit more sensitive to getting the voice to voice connection, in spite of the ability to go on site.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting for me personally, with our customers, you're emailing actually a lot less, to your point, and not as many emails, more Zoom calls, more texting, interestingly enough. And I don't know what the feature is, but that feature where you can like press and hold and record your voice message, like your phone turns into a
Oh, yeah,
walkie-talkie.
like the audio clip. That's a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting one.
Yeah, totally. That's become like a thing, with just chatting, because it's much easier than texting, and then you also get to hear the person's voice.
Like
So that's,
instant voicemail or
yeah,
something.
exactly. Yeah, except who listens to voicemail?
Yeah. It's a really
uh,
weird thing that, I mean, I see with my iPhone, but like it was just there one day and it wasn't rolled out as like this new like exciting feature, and it just has stuck.
totally. How many of us roll out features and then after the fact we're like, oh, right, I should have told you. We did that really amazing thing last week. I
Right.
don't know how. I don't know how it didn't come up.
Yeah.
Well, on that topic of, collaborating not only with customers, but with your team members, knowing that you guys are already, I know you have a team over in Paris, there's a team in Boston. So seems to me like you are a well-oiled machine. You understand how to collaborate remotely. The team is humming along. Have you noticed now that sort of the world is remote, that it has changed how you interact with marketing or product teams, or is really things stayed the same for you given how Cardiologs already operates?
Yeah, we were uniquely prepared for this situation, right? Because, so for the listeners out there, right, our commercial function lives in the Boston office. That's our only other office besides Paris, which is really headquarters, and where every other function essentially lives. And so we were very used to, being aware of and sensitive to our virtual environment, our virtual office space. So I think the only thing that the thing that I've seen us be affected by is there's just a lot of camaraderie with the Paris team, for sure, and we've seen them be just missing each other, right? So and I think and we have a great culture, and one that everybody really loves to see each other in the office. The Paris team doesn't work from home nearly as much as people in the U.S. do. That I think that's a cultural difference. And so there's definitely been some of that. And they just started going back into the office last week in shifts, of course. So everybody's been you can feel the temperature, but you can feel the excitement just over like Slack and things like that, because people have been seeing some of their colleagues they haven't seen in months.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I think all of us are really looking forward to um, having this be something that's in the past. I know each of us are affected differently, and I think for me personally, it's really nice to focus on the excitement that's occurring now that people are starting to be able to get out. We have a friend that recently went to the barber for the first time in months, and
That's a big one.
that's a big one. Like, I was fascinated by that experience and wanted to hear all about it. So it's really interesting how conversations have changed, where probably normally Brendan, who's the head of customer success at Crayon, we wouldn't have normally talked about his experience going to the barber, you know what I mean? But like, it
Right.
was a whole 15-minute conversation the other day. But okay, let's take it back a bit, because I know we jumped ahead, or didn't jump ahead. We talked a lot about how you're operating today, where you're located, where you're normally located, how the Cardiologs team is doing. But I'm really curious to know, you and I have talked just a bit about this in the past, but I would love to hear more about how you have found yourself in customer success. And just a note for our listeners. So Justin's title is that he is the head of customer services, or excuse me, client services. And we talked about the distinction and really connection between heads of services and heads of success, and how you sometimes see this term used interchangeably, where leaders in client success are leaders in customer success because of the proactive nature that's required when you're working so closely with your clients, with your customers, with your users. So I'm curious to know how you found yourself in this field. Was it a natural evolution? Did you seek out this field, and how that has evolved for you?
Sure. So it was a pretty like line in the sand kind of, not moment, but period in my life where I realized that what I wanted to do, or kind of the type of work I wanted to do. I right out of school, I worked for one of the big financial institutions, which will remain unnamed. But the job was fine, but it was definitely kind of your standard head down cubicle job. And a few years into that role, I realized that I didn't like what I was doing, but not because of the actual work itself, but because of the lack of social, interaction that it required. Right. Mm-hmm. I would obviously talk to colleagues all the time, and you're with all your friends, or with your colleagues making friends, but that wasn't my job. I realized I wanted to work with people as a part of my job, not a byproduct of my job. Mm. And so that's when I realized that's what I was kind of missing. That's why I was kind of unhappy. And, from that point on, I started, looking for opportunities to get into that, and I that was kind of one of those risky times in your life where I started to get pigeonholed. I had been at a company for X amount of years doing this one thing. And I said, if I don't break out of this now, it'll be hard for me to get into another career. So that began my search. And, at the time back then, there wasn't customer success, wasn't the term, right? So it was account management really was that. And so I started looking for account management jobs, and that was how I kind of launched into things.
That's so cool. How did you, and you stated it so crisply, I haven't heard someone describe it that way before, but the idea of, connecting with people and building relationships being a product, not a byproduct. Is that something that how did you come to that so crisply? Like, did someone else, do you have a mentor that mentioned that? Or did you sort of just think, about, I don't know, your trajectory and where you wanted to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think back then I didn't realize that kind of phrasing, right? That has been developed over the years as over however many icebreakers I've had with new hire orientations and things of that nature. But I do think about this stuff a lot, right? You kind of talked about this earlier about, thinking you would be a psychologist or something. I was a communications major in college, and a lot of those classes were anthropology kind of related or adjacent. And so that has kind of, and I've always enjoyed those. And I talk about how, being in customer success or client-facing roles is a type of psychology, and being kind of a bit of a psychologist. And so I'm always really thinking about my role, the things I've done, and how I can relay those to other people, because I really do love to network and learn from other people and share my experiences. I'm always kind of polishing the way I say it so that I'm not long-winded, and I can kind of get messages across.
Oh gosh, you're much better at that than I am. I was thinking about that this morning. I'm reading a book by Donald Miller, and I'm blanking on what it's called. It's funny now that I'm listening to a book on Audible, and it's about storytelling essentially, but for businesses, building a story brand. And he talks about the importance of being crisp, not being long-winded, describing what you do or what your company does in a way where if a caveman was to listen to it, he could sort of like gruff back what he thinks you are and what you do. And I definitely struggle with that, and struggle being really verbose. So I think, you talked a lot about what motivates you as a person. How did you, a lot of us, when we're thinking of what field we want to be in, we don't always connect the fact that what personally motivates us might translate well into a profession. Sometimes there's a disconnect. And so I think, I'm curious to know for you, knowing that relationships motivate you, are there other key motivating factors that keep you loving customer success? And if so, what are they?
Sure. I would definitely say that there's definitely parallels in my life, or my kind of personal attributes that translate to the professional world. And one is just, I'm a social person. So when I'm not at home and I'm out and about doing things, generally it's like with people, friends, family, and so I always just like to be around. And I have a big network. I have a big network of friends, which my wife is always like, how do you, like, we've been together for like 10 years and still meeting like new friends of yours. So yeah, there's that for sure. That's the main driver. I think another thing, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true, is I've been an athlete my whole life. Nike shirt. And I think that's kind of part of it, is there's a competitiveness about doing things correctly, following, kind of training and practicing, right?
Yes.
And executing when it's time to execute, and kind of getting up for, the moment, and things of that nature. So that's definitely like a part of me that translates well to the professional realm. Is I'm constantly practicing, I'm constantly researching, preparing, so that when it's game time, I've done everything to set myself up for success.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love the athlete mentality too, the sort of suit up, show up mentality, where the prep work happens, the training happens, and that's what sets you up for hopefully amazing conversations and experiences with your customers. That definitely resonates with me. Although I got into sports much later in life. And I now understand, as a result, the idea of team-based activities, which sounds really strange. But when you grow up like in arts and in music, and there's not, a lot of it's very individual. So I think, speaking of team building, and this is something that I definitely wanted to ask you about, when you think about the things that motivate you and the successes that you've had so far in your field and what's set you up for that success, do you look for similar things in the people that you hire? Or do you look for them to be similar to you, to complement you, both? For those of us, or those, might be listening, that are on the lookout for jobs in customer success, I'm curious to know, what are those defining factors that you like to look for when you're hiring someone?
That's a great question, and one that we have actually been talking about as we have been looking to grow the client services team. As I've been talking to my peers and leadership, is who do we hire first? Who's my first direct report? Who's my second? Who's my third? So on and so forth. And one term that we've kind of, or a phrase we've said a few times, is we don't want to hire another Justin for this role, and so it depends. The answer is going to, a lot of times from me, you're going to hear it depends. It depends on what role I'm hiring for and what need I'm filling. I realize that, if I hired somebody with a similar personality and skill set to me, then that translates well for certain roles and doesn't translate well for others, right? And that's another kind of thing that is always good to be aware of, is your strengths and weaknesses. So I certainly have weaknesses that don't translate well for certain roles. So if I'm hiring for that, and I find myself in an interview with someone who I'm getting along with in a friendly way, where I'm like, oh, this person is kind of like me, well, maybe that's a red flag for this particular role. So
Totally.
It's just being aware of matching the personality with the role. And so I try not to apply kind of blanket statements or blanket knowledge to my kind of hiring or interviewing process, right? It's case dependent. Am I hiring a business analyst? Then I'm not looking for a Justin. You know, am I hiring a CSM? Probably looking for, you know, someone who works like me, because I feel like that's my strong suit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's smart. We've all heard the sort of hire A team players. And you know, in my experience, I found just with starting companies that to look for co-founders that have differing skill sets from me, because we have our swim lanes, and we really need to be individuals that can work really well within our swim lane. And I know when you're building a, you know, a client services or a client or customer success team, certainly you all have one major objective that's the same. And I'm curious to know what your objectives are for your team. You're all working towards that, but you likely have individuals that would work really great with specific clients because of the strengths that they have that might be different from, you know, another CSM. So speaking of new beginnings, correct me if I'm wrong, you are just starting now to build out or to think about building out your team from a client success client services perspective. Do you have an additional member, or are you looking to hire that additional person?
So I am a team of one
Yes.
right now. Yes.
Yes.
I am client services currently.
I am fascinated by the teams of one, just to throw that out there. And it will, you know, anyone listening today, you guys are on the earlier side as far as a startup goes, and just building out a lot of these. Look, you've built out these processes before at previous companies. This is not your first rodeo, but I'm so interested to hear how you are looking at the team that you're going to build today and how that might be different from teams that you've built in the past.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. There's a lot to say there, so I'll try to be concise about it. Use some of my audio clips to fill the gaps. But yeah, I've been with Cardiologs for a year. This is definitely my first time building out from scratch. There was really no clients. There was no client services. I was the first person they brought in to do that, and so I've definitely stood up and evolved these functions at other companies, but they either existed in some way, shape, or form already, and I was kind of improving upon it, or we'd be like transforming into something different, but had some type of base to look at. So, yeah, when I came in, you know, my original kind of thought was like, okay, how, you know, when can I build this team up and figure this out, and realized pretty quickly that what I wanted to do was do the job first. Right? There's a bunch of preconceived notions I had about how to stand up or how to operate a client services function. But I realized, you know, I'm coming into a company that it's a SaaS company. It's healthcare tech. It's the world that I've been in, but it still has its uniqueness. And so I said, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to just do the job, figure it out as much as, you know, I can. Perfect it, if you will, and then I'll have a better understanding of when I need to hire, who I need to hire, how I need to hire. And so, and then the other variable in all that obviously is your customer base, right? So if you start closing deals, if our amazing sales guy starts closing deals at a rapid pace, well then obviously you need to staff up. I think we're lucky to have a nice mix of that, where I was able to do the job, do the function, and exist bandwidth-wise with the customers that we had or that we signed as I came on board. And we are now at that point where I feel confident enough about my findings over the last year, and we are hitting a customer kind of critical mass with customers where my bandwidth is now challenged to where we're ready to build out. And depending on when this airs, we may have one or two new people. So it's, I mean, today we were talking just today about some candidates. And so hopefully, you know, this airs, there's new candidates I've already announced on LinkedIn or something, but
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of been the progression so far.
That's so cool. I think, you know, in the short time that we've known each other, my sense about you and your sort of magic around leadership is the fact that it is important for you to understand exactly what the job is that you're hiring for. You don't just want to understand from a 50,000 foot view. You want to know tactically how the sausage is made, and then jump strategically to how that team is going to grow and what that means for the value of your customers. I'm hugely interested in leadership that is tactically and strategically focused, those people that are operators, and they're also advisors, because it is a hugely difficult role to fill, and not many people can do that, or are interested in doing that. So, and for me, when I was at Promobox, the company I built, or co-founded before Quala, I had my own book of business the entire 10 years I was there. I wasn't sure of another way to understand intricately what our customer experience looks like, unless I was in there doing. So I'm just a person that learns by action. I think, for you, and how I watch or have listened to you talk about how you work, it seems like you put a premium on truly understanding what the, client success managers or client services managers experiences is going to be, and how that relates to the customer experience, and then how that translates into how you lead and grow your initiatives, which I find admirable. There are not a lot of people that can do exactly that. So for you, is it just something you came naturally into? This is how you learn, or did you observe other mentors or leaders operate this way, and you decided that was important to you? How did you come to sort of this method of working?
Sure. And thank you for the compliment. Very nice of you. I still have a lot to learn, and a lot of room for growth there. But I definitely, I think naturally, I am just drawn to staying in touch with customers. The day that either someone tells me or I feel like I am out of touch is keeps me up at night, so to speak. And partially, I think I've definitely seen leaders and mentors of mine who displayed the same, similar style and attributes. I've also seen the opposite, and so I've observed the opposite, and how that has, the results of that, kind of being out of touch, and being disconnected from the customer voice, and what that entails. And it's difficult because, there is a day where, I don't know when it will happen, but there is a day where, responsibilities will pull you further and further away. You'll be as further away than you've ever realized. And I'll probably pull my head out of the sand and say, wow, I've really missed the boat on this, or I haven't talked to a customer in X amount of time. And some of it is just, is reasonable to happen. And I think one thing that we can all do, as people who are growing to leadership roles for customer success or client services, is just try to be aware of that, right? That's the best you can do, is be aware of when you feel like you're missing that, and then pivot to figure out how you can get that back, or hold on to it if it is slipping. And so I've never gotten to that point. I assume it's somewhere in the future, and I'll have to just tackle it when I do. And hearing that you had a book of business for the entire time you were there is, that is exciting to me. I would not mind kind of still holding on to customers and being that named contact for them for a long time. But if the progression of the company pulls me away from that, then we would just have to find ways to stay connected.
Yeah. I love the agility at which, that you speak about, and the fact that you have priorities as a leader, and you have an idea of what you would really want things to look like, but you hold loosely to that, and totally open to the fact that things are going to change. And I think that's uniquely, or maybe not, but my impression is that since there is so much uncertainty, regardless, if you're working for a startup, there's a huge level of uncertainty. There's another macro thing at play that adds to that, but let's put that aside for just a second. I think when you are used to dealing with a lot of uncertainty, then you hold loosely to your ideas. And that's, you know, always been something that's really been comforting to me. When you talked earlier about your mentors and your leaders around you and your community, um, watching them and seeing what you loved about what they were doing and the ramifications and some of the things that you maybe didn't love that had outcomes that weren't fantastic. Um, you talked in another conversation, you had mentioned about the community that you built at Athena, I believe.
Athena,
Um,
yes.
yes. And
Athena helps.
how, yeah, right. Thank you. Um, and how important that was for your growth as a person and how you're instilling contact with so many of these people today, bouncing off ideas on LinkedIn and chatting often. I'm curious to know how that community started, how you built it, continue to foster it, because I know many of us, to your points earlier, sometimes we find ourselves a little bit out of touch. So you're naturally a empathetic, energetic person, and I'm guessing an extrovert. But how do you keep those relationships going? How do you foster them?
Um, I'll say that some of it is natural. Some people you're just naturally, you just naturally become close with and friendly with, and you just keep connections, right? But some of it, and this goes for for different personalities more than others. There's work that goes into it, right? And I don't mean that. I don't mean like keeping up a network and faking it, right? And just putting in the effort to reach out to people and stay connected, so that you can say you're staying connected and you can say you're networking. But there are people in my network, so to speak, that I genuinely care about. Did great. We worked together greatly. Did some great things. But life takes you in different places, in different directions, and takes you away from some of those connections sometimes. And there are times where I'm thinking about things I'm trying to remember something I did at Athena, so that I can think about how to accomplish it here at Cardiologs. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did that project with that person. I missed them. We haven't spoken in a few months. I should hit them up, and whether or not I connect with them to actually talk about that thing I'm trying to figure out, or just catch up, go grab lunch or something like that. There's effort involved there. I'm a walking caricature of an extrovert. So for me, I just keep, I have connections with people that I do keep close and in frequent contact with. But for others, I totally see that not everybody's like that. And so the amount of effort that you have to put in is real.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. That's a good point to make. And it's sustained effort over time, right? And I think your thoughts on how to naturally continue fostering these relationships, you aren't awkwardly reaching out, right? You're reaching out for a purpose. You are trying to start something new. You're creating a team from scratch. You're now at Cardiologs. Do you have ideas on how to do X, Y, and Z? And I don't think I've ever reached out to someone, this is a bold statement, and asked for help where they were sort of like, sorry, I have no time for you. I think we're naturally wants to help other
Right.
people.
Right.
So it's a easier way, for those of you listening that are looking to understand, how do I build a network? How do I stay in touch? What do those moments look like? I think keeping them natural and letting them, come up, and if there are questions that you have in your day to day, it's likely that someone that can help you answer them, and just reach out. It doesn't have to be a big formal thing.
Exactly, and that's the thing. There's definitely people who you have different levels of relationship with everybody, right? And there's definitely people who I'll reach out to and I'll say, like, I miss you, and like I miss working with you. Like, we haven't hung out in a while. Like, let's get some lunch. But also I wanted to talk about this, this problem I'm facing. And then there's other people who I had completely fine relationships with. We just, we weren't super close for whatever reason. Maybe we didn't work together that much, or we just weren't that close from a social aspect. But I will still reach out to, because, just I'm on good terms with them, and I'll say, hey, I hope you don't mind. I have a question to bounce off of you, and I'm not going to try to become best friends or ask them out to lunch or coffee or dinner, because I'm not trying to fake that we were best friends or more than we were. But hey, we're just professionals trying to make it, trying to trying to strive for the best we can, and let's just connect it and help each other out if possible. And so that's the other side of it too, is I think I've talked to you about this before, I'm always happy to share with other people. I always like to reciprocate. I hate to feel like I'm taking from somebody and not giving something back. So I think that's important. That's also a thing that I don't think comes naturally to just humans in general, right? It's like a lot of times you're like, I need something, I need this answer, I'm going to ask this person for this answer. It would be great if they give it to me, and then I can go on with my day and accomplish the thing I want to accomplish. I try to be aware of the fact that I don't want to just take. And so whether it's in a certain interaction where they give me something that I need, I want to make sure I give them back, or just in general, make sure I'm kind of giving back to whatever kind of world or community I can. So, like I think you and I were talking a week or so ago, and I said, no matter where we go business-wise, I would, I can already tell that we kind of align on so many things. I'd love to keep this connection up, and I'm happy to always give my perspective to you to help you accomplish what you want.
Yeah, I really appreciated that too. I mean, as someone that's, back into early stage building technology for customer success teams, you put yourself out there, right? A lot of what you do is, yes, it's a product and a platform. It's separate from you, but it's so connected to you. So it feels very personal. And when I get to have those moments where people, and you definitely led on this point, you're like, hey, look, we're going down a journey. We're going to learn more about what we do. That's going to be great. But aside from that, there's a synergy here. I think we can learn from each other. That's awesome and separate. And, whatever happens with if we work together or not, there's sort of like a friendship that's there. And that just like, it's just a weight off of my shoulders, I think, for someone that's like, because I know that I'm going to get honest feedback and answers from you, that's going to help regardless of whatever the outcome is going to help us be a better company and for me to be a better human being. And that's what I'm motivated by. So yeah, I appreciated that about you. So let's land this plane. I have a final question for you that I think a lot of CS leaders that are starting out teams for the first time, creating them and knowing that you're going through this right now, you're a tried and true, a veteran of the industry and professional. Do you have any advice or thoughts for them as they're thinking through how to build their own teams that might, lend a helping hand as they're thinking through, all right, how do I, what type of person am I looking for? Am I really even ready to hire right now? And anything that you can help pay forward to them that would help them with their process or search.
Sure. I think two kind of things pop up in my mind, and one is something really corny. It's another nice little like phrase, and some of my it's become a little bit of a joke for some of my former colleagues at Athena. I coined this phrase when I had kind of reached a bit of a leadership position at Athena, and was kind of trying to bring up and help the team grow and perform, to the level we wanted. It was always be gauging. So you can accomplish something with customers, 99% of the time. A certain approach, a certain style works for whatever activity or project or hurdle that you're trying to get over. But there's always going to be that 1% of the time where the tried and true didn't work. And so I started to tell my team, and I actually printed this on towels that we gave for a retreat.
That's so cool.
Always be gauging. So yeah, never rest on your laurels. Always understand if the approach you're taking in this moment for this engagement for this customer is the right one. Don't just, if you develop kind of playbooks and scripts and project plans, those are great. Those are necessary. You have to have those. But empower, as a leader, always be gauging to see if those need to be changed or improved. And give your people the ability or empower them to go off that script if they sense that, something different needs to be done. And then I'd say that the other piece of advice that kind of popped into my head when you were asking me that is one thing that I realized early on when I was kind of given the reins, given the keys to the castle for client services at Cardiologs was I would get asked, they look to me as the client service person and the person who would answer all these questions that they didn't, know about or have answers to. And I was in my mind going, oh, I need to have an answer for this. I need to have a strategy for this. Whether I've done it or not before, I need to have something. And I realized that, that's not the type of person, that's not the type of leader that you necessarily need to be. They're not hiring you. I wouldn't hire somebody because I think that person has all the answers and has done all of the things and has all the experiences, but because they have most of those things or have done most of those experiences and can apply that, but they are willing to go find the answer if they don't have it. So that's the thing. I mean, I don't want to reveal secrets of my trade, but there are plenty of times where I'm faced with a question or something and I'm just Googling. I'm Googling and, there are some like kind of publications out there that I now have learned I feel like are good sources to me. And so I'll kind of go back to those same kind of blogs or publications. But I'm going to Google things. I'm going to see what's out there. I'm going to talk to my network. Like I said, I have that kind of group of people, Dan and that group of friends who
shout out to Dan.
Shout out to Dan. He's going to love that I shouted him out. We were just, if I'm facing something and I'll just, I'll Google it. I'll find the blogs that I've looked at before that I think gave me good advice. Or I'll reach out to my network and say, hey, is anyone doing this right now? Or did you do this recently? And so just never be afraid to be vulnerable and say, I don't know, or I have an idea, but let me go validate that and do some research. So I think that was a big learning thing for me this year is just you are not the sole holder of the information and the answers. There's plenty of resources out there that you can leverage.
100%. I love that. Yeah, we don't have to shoulder it all, to your point. I'll probably ask you for some of those resources. I can include them in the show notes for people that want to take a look at some of the places that you go when you're looking for answers. Where can people find you if they're looking to connect with you?
Sure. So, I mean, easily find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out there. I do not mind people emailing me. So in true startup fashion, it's easy to get a hold of me, justin@cardiologs.com. I think those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. Reach out if you have, questions, want to just chat, want to network, want direction on anything. I'm always open to share.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. This was great to spend some time together and hear your thoughts on, building new teams from scratch, what motivates you as a CS leader, how you got into the space and what keeps you there, and some of the key advice that you have for people that are either just joining or just coming online in whether client services or customer success, and leaders that are building their team. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'll include some of the resources that we talked about in show notes, also a link to your LinkedIn and how they can get in touch with you. And this was so much fun. Thank you.
Sansi, all of those same things back to you. I have yet to not fully enjoy the chats we've had. I hope that I can come back and have one of these again. I'm sure we'll be chatting soon, but thanks for having me. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks.